SharkNation. We are back here in Greystone Studios. We've got Mark Baker out there in Glenageary. How you doing, Mark?
Good, Luke. Good to be here.
You know what, Mark? We got a new SD card and we are ready to go. We've got 40 hours of content to fill, and we're very excited to have our friend Ogie Hollywood, possibly the best name in the world. How are you doing, Ogie?
Yeah, very good, guys. Thanks very much for having me on today.
So, Ogie, we came into contact with you from our mutual friend Barry Hickey. Shout out B Hick on the Liverpool win as well. I saw him on Instagram. He's loving that. He's got the champers out. So thanks very much for putting us in touch. Do you know, the last time I seen Barry, this is kind of a poignant piece, Mark. When last time I seen Barry, I just bumped into him, and I think it was maybe the 13th or 14th of March, and it was on the Dart, and it was a packed Dart. This is just before the proper lockdown. And I was so out of touch with that, because Ogie, we're not we don't really watch the news that much here, because it's a lot of negativity, kind of brings me down, that sort of stuff. So I would kind of isolate myself a little bit from that. So I seen him on the Dart, and I went to shake his hand, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I don't shake hands anymore. I felt like I was just completely like I was a caveman who just woke up to the new reality. But that's how different the world was 3 months ago. But anyway, yeah. An interest in there, so hopefully Barry's doing well. So Ogie, just to give some context to the listeners, Ogie is working for Google. He's in the e-commerce digital strategy area. He works with some of the biggest e-commerce players in the UK, so we're glad to have him on for that. He's also interested in a lot of mental health stuff, and has an interesting story, as he said beforehand when we had a chat. Not your typical maybe journey towards Google. So Ogie, why don't we go back to the beginning here, because we need to dig in to kind of give some context for the guys here. We're going to talk about all things e-commerce and all that type of stuff, because me and Mark want to in the future just have this e-commerce business that just feeds us cash. But we haven't worked it out yet, but we're really trying to put that together. So maybe we'll pick your brain on that as well, get some insider knowledge. But so where are you from? Where were you born?
So from Westmeath originally, and that's kind of where I would have grew up, and I went to school. Moved around quite a bit around kind of Westmeath and a number of different houses when I was younger. But yeah, that's kind of where myself and would have grew up by three other siblings and myself, and just with my mum. And yeah, I guess.
And was it like a technology house where you guys did you always want to work in technology growing up, or what drove you to want to work in Google?
No, definitely not, to be honest. If anything, the polar opposite. I think growing up, neither of my parents really had careers in a kind of professional capacity. My dad passed away when I was very young. He unfortunately committed suicide. And that kind of situation, I guess, left my mum as a single parent raising 4 kids, which, for her, it was all she could do was to support us. And I'm very, very grateful for everything that she gave us in that capacity. And I think, but in terms of the surrounding that I was kind of put into at quite a young age, was essentially living in social housing, and in an environment that, when I look back now, looking in terms of like mentors or people to look up to or aspirations, there's very few people from my estate who would have finished school, and never mind going to college or working for a big tech company. So in terms of that kind of motivation, I think it was very, very intrinsic. It was very much to look at how to better myself, and more so looking into if I ever want to have a family, what could I provide for them, and what kind of situation would I want them to be in. And then honestly, that was, in some ways the opposite to what I thought I had, even though there's a lot of love in my family, a lot of support, and a lot of encouragement. It wasn't the idyllic setting, I guess, that you picture when you see kind of a family life, if that makes sense.
When you talk about those areas where a lot of people around you aren't finishing school, it's weird how much that affects you, even if you do have a good kind of, like I said, good household base. I know obviously there's a lot of challenges there, coming from a single parent household as well. I hear you on that one. But like I said, we're always happy enough. But going to the kind of mentorship in those type of areas, that's something that's affecting people across the world in those type of environments. We can see what's happening in America as well. The kind of local leadership is something that's so missing. I remember, even growing up, there's no programs, or there's no one really telling you giving any advice on the future. What do you think, Mark? Was there when you were so Mark is from Shankill in Dublin, which is kind of like I would say working class suburb. Mark, would you call it that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there anyone in there telling people that they can go out and chase some dreams, or was it just kind of try to keep them off?
Yeah, well, there was two people telling me that. It was my mum and dad. You know, they used to always tell me you could be a doctor if you wanted. I don't know why they said that, but that was the pinnacle, and that was probably the right thing to say, because that's what I thought was the pinnacle. I didn't want to be a doctor, but I knew, oh, geez, I'm able to become a doctor. Well, then I can do pretty much anything. So it's kind of a great thing to say. I only kind of realized that a few years ago that it worked, and it was a great thing to say. And I probably say something similar to my kids now. But yeah, surrounding me was, there was a big drug problem and stuff like that, and in Shankill at the time. So I do think, to go back to what you said, Ogie, it was intrinsic, my kind of motivation. So apart from, we're lucky to have great parents. So apart from them, there wasn't really any other kind of guidance or path apart from do good in school, go to college. But a lot of people do that and they end up nowhere. Like, so it was like, what do I do in school and what do I do in college? So I think that's the key thing. That's a bit more than just do that, you know.
I think, is there a gap in the market for some sort of organization that goes into schools and gives them some other options into a future? Say, okay, you can go to college, you can do I know we always go on about the accounting thing, but it is kind of almost like an accounting class in Ireland where it's like, that's where people go.
It's a profession. It's one of the biggest professions. Yeah, it's stable, and that's why I went into it.
Yeah. I don't know if we go into the schools and do some kind of not-for-profit stuff. Might be interesting.
I think there is. A lot of schools will probably, now that we don't know, you know, people will come in, maybe tech people. I'm sure there is, but it should be in every school, and it should be kind of compulsory, some sort of guidance on that.
It's an interesting one, because we were like, if the main HubSpot office is right there beside kind of Sheriff Street area, kind of a difficult area to grow up in sometimes. So we do some like fundraising for them as well, and to support their soccer team and stuff. But maybe some actual, like, more than just sending the jerseys, maybe send some humans in there, and you know what I mean? Might be interesting. But anyway, we digress. So Ogie, you're living, you're coming up in such an advantaged place. What happened when you went to college? What did you do? Where did you go?
Yeah, I actually studied down in Galway. I went to GMIT, and it's an interesting moment when you touch on the point around career guidance, or kind of that mentorship in school. It's kind of a funny one, because whenever I was in primary school, I was classified as dyslexic, so I was taken out of Irish class. And when I entered my secondary school, I remember going to, I think you had to be reassessed essentially for dyslexia, and they were like, well, look, we have to essentially put you through this test to kind of see what your level of dyslexia currently is. And when I did it, it was that mild that they're like, you no longer have an exemption, but because you haven't studied Irish for the last 7 or 8 years, we will just allow you to continue essentially doing like extra maths or extra English, and just don't go into the Irish class. And as a 12 or 13-year-old, that didn't really make too much difference. But it was when I got to my Leaving Cert year that I kind of realized all universities in Ireland required second language and Irish in order to enter. And it was kind of, I guess this kind of comes back to not really having much in the way of kind of career mentors, or in my family knowing much about university or college, or what that meant, or what I needed to do, or what I need to study. And I guess so I obviously went to my career guidance, who was the person you, I guess, go to look to in school. And maybe somewhat to do with where I came from in the town, and their perception of that area was kind of like, oh, well, just apply for an IT. They do pretty much the same thing. They have similar courses. You're interested in business, and for me, one of the positive things was I always knew I was interested in business. There was never any doubt in my mind of what I wanted to study. It was always business. It was like I love entrepreneurship. I've always loved business. I've been very entrepreneurial growing up. So that choice was a no-brainer. But it was like, I'll just don't bother applying for any of the universities, because you don't have Irish, and you actually no longer have a strong enough exemption to be classified as exempt. And I remember being told, like, you can go and get tested yourself if you want to, and it'll cost you €500 externally to do the test, but you're not going to pass that test because you're not severe enough as dyslexic anymore. And I was like, this is clearly like, a problem that you guys have created for me in the setting that you put me in. I couldn't do Irish because you didn't allow me to do it. And now that's restricting me from going to university. And, being honest, I was very naive, and also didn't have many other sounding boards to go against. So I just applied for ITs. Applied for DIT and for GMIT, and like I did a pretty good leaving cert. I think I had higher points than pretty much every university business course in Ireland. I believe I could have went to UCD or Trinity, but I didn't apply for any of them, and I also wouldn't have been able to go due to the exemption from Irish. So I found myself in GMIT, which was a great 4 years for me, and I the people that I met there, the community that I found, and Galway in general is a fantastic place to study. As a young guy growing up in Galway and moving away from home, there isn't many better places to go. Great student life, great city, relatively cheap in comparison to Dublin. Nearly everyone moves away from home, so you have much more of a kind of that kind of a setting of being away from home. Everyone's living away from home, whereas I think in Dublin, a lot of people are forced to live at home just due to the kind of expense of rent in Dublin. So yeah, like college years were good for me. Like I always kind of excelled in college. I got an academic scholarship to GMIT due to my leaving cert points, and that obviously supported me there. And again, also got kind of full government aid and a full grant in order to study, which again is something that only realizing now that in this country we're extremely lucky to have. And I think that access to free education and kind of government grant aid is something that really pushes and encourages people like myself to get an education who simply wouldn't have had a chance to otherwise. There was no way that my mum could have afforded to pay fees, let alone cost of accommodation and living expenses to live in Galway. So like that was an amazing addition for me.
We're incredibly lucky. So I talk to people, like most of the people that I work with are international because there's a lot of languages needed, all that type of stuff. And like even some of those places where you think that would be, that university would be free or really cheap. I can't believe that I actually got paid to go to college because I was in whatever bracket my family income was in. I had what was called the New Era scheme.
So did I.
It's actually now defunct, Mark. I don't think it's something.
Was it? Yeah.
I think it's something, they have a different way of doing it. But I remember I used to get a check every month, as well as it wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough money so I wouldn't have to worry enough to drop out to get a full-time job. That's kind of it. And then I also got my my rail and bus pass, so I could go anywhere. Just those little things, and it just made it so much easier. It takes the choice, the hard choices that a lot of people would have to make out of it. And even I was born in Canada and lived there on and off for 9 years. So even in Canada, where you think this is they kind of portray Canada as like a utopia where it's free healthcare and all that type of stuff. You actually pay a lot into it. And if you want to go to a top tier university and do like a master's degree, you're talking $60,000-$70,000. These types of things, right? So in Ireland, we're incredibly lucky. And there's also this is another thing, Mark, I know, how many times have we talked about the career guidance counselor in our secondary school that we went to? But
probably too many.
Probably too many times. Okay, but did you know that you can go? So, you're talking about your guidance was okay. You're not going to get into some universities. Okay, so go to ITs, which I'm not saying anything about. I went to an IT. I got a good experience there. But do you know that you can go and study in Stockholm for free and do your university degree? That no one tells you that. And they speak English there, and the courses are in English. So there's all these other options. I'd love to just go into school and just have the kids for a day and go through every option that you could possibly think of, and just kind of broaden the mind a little bit. Because the one track, if you don't fit into that, like you're saying, okay, I want to go to Trinity. That's what you have to go there if you're going to be successful. That's kind of not what people think, but it's kind of the vibe that you get a little bit when you're in secondary school. And we talked to somebody last week who's just finished his BCom degree, and we were really like, he's probably 22 or something. He's just leaving anyway, college, and he's going to chase his dream, going full time his own business. And me and Mark were basically, I would say, his cheerleaders last week. What do you think, Mark? we were like, yeah, go for it. So
I think why kids don't get the guidance that you're talking about there, Luke, and saying going in and providing them some guidance is because there's actually nothing in it for you to do that. There's no incentive for you to go in and do that apart from just to make yourself feel good that day if you have a few spare hours. So I think there lies the problem.
It's not okay. So there's it's obviously no business in that, but there could be. What about the what's the stuff?
Being a guidance counselor within a school.
Yeah, being a guidance no. Oh, yeah, well, obviously, yeah.
you see, that would be the obvious solution, but it obviously hasn't worked for every single person that we've spoken to.
What about those businesses in America? I don't think they have them here yet. Where they say, okay, come to our university or our college or whatever, we'll train you to do X, Y, and Z, and then you pay us when you get a good job out of it. Have you heard of these?
No.
It's called, I forget the name of it now, but it's a really big one, really well funded in San Francisco. And what they do is they teach you they come in, it's like a boot camp for whatever, 2 years or 3 years or something, and they teach you exactly what you need for a particular tech job, and then you pay them back. Like, so it's completely free, but they own a percentage of your income for the next 5 years. But they like try to push you into jobs and stuff because it aligns their interest with your interest. Do you know what I mean?
That's win-win.
You know?
That sounds great.
I think that's something that we could build here and get some funding. We're talking to the original venture capitalist of Ireland last week. Maybe we give him a call. I think if he's got any spare cash. Anyway, so we're in Galway. Galway, what a wonderful city to study in. Every time I go there, I have a great time. The vibe is so good walking around. You're so close to the sea, all that type of stuff. But when you're coming out of college, what are you thinking? Are you excited to get out of there? Are you worried about what to do next? What's the story then?
Yeah, it was a bit of a funny few years. In terms of I think it was my third year in college was a period where I had some serious challenges with my mental health. It was actually, in the summertime, I went through what's known as like a psychotic breakdown. So experiencing symptoms of psychosis, where I was actually hospitalized for a number of weeks in a psychiatric ward. It was a very, very traumatic time, to be honest, and it was something that took a lot of time to understand and trying to get to the bottom of what had happened. And to be honest, after the first time, I pretty much just tried to ignore it. I was like, okay, this happened. I just need to get on with life. I need to kind of almost forget that it happened and just pretend that everything's normal. And it happened then the second year in a row. And the second year was that time coming up to my third year exams, about a week or two before my exams were starting. And pretty much the exact same symptoms. Psychosis is quite a challenging thing to explain, but it's almost like depressive psychosis is where you have very depressed negative thoughts, and you become delusional and can hallucinate in generally very negative ways. So you feel the world maybe is imploding in on you, and you feel like people are against you or the world is against you, and it all becomes very real in your head. It's quite a severe psychiatric challenge.
Oh my God.
It's something, yeah, it was a very, very interesting time in my life. And for me, I guess, because of the way that my dad passed away through suicide, he had suffered with bipolar disorder, which is, a very severe mental health disorder. And, back whenever he passed away, there was very little, research or support for mental health in general. And it was very misunderstood at the time. And I think that stigma that was surrounding that, and obviously the lack of support potentially is what led to his circumstances. And for me, I was very, very quick to assume or to jump on thinking that, okay, I'm having very similar symptoms and I must have a similar disorder. I must have a similar mental health illness. And, essentially self-diagnosed myself. I read everything I could read online, and, I was on medication for a number of months. I was in a very, very poor place. I had to defer all of my college exams for that summer. I had 6 exams. I deferred every one of them. And I spent 2 months essentially not leaving my house. And I was in a very, very dark place. And that place was where, I essentially gave up. I was like, if I'm going to have to deal with this once a year or more, there's physically no way for me to hold down a job, let alone finish college, let alone have a family, like anything. For me, it was just like this. If this is the way it is, I simply can't live this way. And it was a point in my life where it was very, very challenging to accept. And I kind of got, I went into a very, very low space even after I came out of the episode itself. I went through essentially a number of months of suffering with depression because of that low feelings of hopelessness, essentially, of like I'm a hopeless case. I can't finish college. I'm not going to be able to do my exams. I'm never going to be able to get a job. Who would employ someone with a mental health issue? And then essentially it got to a point where I had no other choice, and I was like, look, you need to try and understand this. You need to go and get help, and you need to try and overcome it. And through, very, very grateful that my family pretty much put everything that they had into getting me the best therapy possible. I went to see a CBT specialist up in Derry, who I seen for kind of 8 weeks, and went through a course of cognitive behavioral therapy to try and understand the thoughts that were going through my head and how to address them, how to understand them. I went to obviously through the HSC to psychiatrists, and after a lot of therapy and a lot of understanding and a lot of talking, my psychiatrist said to me, like, look, you don't have a mental health illness. You haven't been diagnosed with an illness, so you're very lucky that you haven't. You have experienced 2 very acute and very serious mental health challenges over the last 2 years, but you don't have an illness. And they're very much led by lifestyle choices and things that you're doing, and lack of sleep, other things that were influencing you during in college years. And from that moment forward, it was like, okay, shit, I need to sort myself out. And I remember it was coming up to, I'd deferred all my deferred exams. I sat that summer and managed to just about scrape through them all, and got into my final year of college. And I think it was the October of that year, because I deferred my exams, my grant funding was delayed, and was delayed for about 6 months. So that meant the money that I would normally get every year to kind of cover rent and cover cost of living was no longer incoming. Because I deferred my exams, my payments were deferred until the results came through, essentially. So I kind of spent 3 months living in Galway with pretty much no money, and was, family were kind of helping me out to pay rent, but I was very much living off little to nothing. And I essentially was like in that situation where I was forced to go. I was like, okay, look, I need to get a job on the side. I obviously couldn't work all summer because I was suffering very with my mental health. I could barely function or leave the house, let alone go and get a part-time job. And yeah, it was essentially there, in maybe October, November of that year, that I went out, got a part-time job for Christmas at Marks and Spencer's, started back doing a bit of running, completely cut out, all of the negative forces in my life, stopped drinking, stopped really, socializing in the scenes that I was socializing in. And all of a sudden just started to really turn this onto a positive stint, and started to use that experience to drive myself forward and say, look, you can be the use case of someone that can get over this and can move forward and can kind of get on with life. And that was where kind of it stemmed into, like, in the space of 2 or 3 months, from kind of being in a really dark place to starting to really see the other side almost, and starting to kind of use that experience to try and help other people. And I started speaking about it, and it was the first time I'd ever spoke about it, because I remember just having so much shame. I remember there was this shame looming over me of, like, there's something wrong with you, you're this is a problem with you, and people will never accept you, or you'll never make anything of yourself. Then I started talking about it, and you start to realize that lots of other people experience lots of challenges with their mental health, and it's actually a very normal thing to go through. And that gave me so much power and confidence in myself to say, okay, no, this is actually it's normal. Yes, it's a challenge, but it can be overcame, and it can be managed, and it can be dealt with. And I end up started giving talks in public forums, and then I mentioned the kind of thing around the charity. We then kind of a college project, essentially, which was to develop a business plan. I was always mad into entrepreneurship, and studied 2 or 3 electives in creativity and innovation and entrepreneurship. And one of those was to lead a kind of project, which I chose to kind of essentially look at establishing a kind of a form of a nonprofit in the mental health space, because that was, at the time, everything that was in my life was around that space. And I guess it just made sense to be like, well, look, how can I give back? How can I help others? And how can I just kind of share this story on a more broad forum? And it just, it took wind. It went from kind of entering into awards in a college program, to then getting funding from a local enterprise office with kind of Skull Enterprises, who are a company that are backed by the credit union in Galway. They gave me an office space to work out of for the kind of 3 months of the summertime. They gave me kind of a mentorship program to kind of look at how do I develop and build it to a further extent. So yeah, my first year after university, when I got through that year, finished all of my exams, and very, very gratefully got my honors degree, and that was something which a year previously felt like it was very, very unobtainable. And yeah, I guess I hadn't applied for any grad jobs. People always say, it's like, yeah, last year of college, get your grad entries into Google and Facebook and your big 4 accounting firms and whatnot. Was never on my agenda whatsoever. I didn't apply for one job, and I was just like, I'm going to try and run this passion. I'm going to see what comes from it. And yeah, so like my first year after graduating was a very interesting year, and a really steep learning curve. Like, I work in sales now, and I kind of only realized back, like, the amount of selling that's involved in trying to set up a business, but more importantly, a nonprofit. You're essentially going with your hand out and asking for stuff pretty much all the time. I think I remember running like a health and well-being expedition, and we got like 14 exhibitors to come and set up their stalls. We got like 7 or 8 keynote speakers to come and give talks. And I think about 50 people turned up, which, is great in a sense, but when you've got 14 exhibitors hoping for a few thousand people coming through the door to give away their free samples, they probably weren't quite too impressed, but I think they appreciated the drive behind it, and I guess the mission that I was trying to support. But yeah, so that kind of was my year after. Like I was essentially working 3 jobs. I worked still at Marks and Spencer's part-time. I got kind of promoted to kind of assistant manager there, so kind of working as a food stock manager. Was working in a charity kind of 20 or 30 hours a week. And then the company who gave me the funding, Skull Enterprises, they also took me on part-time doing kind of marketing and sales role for them. So it was a busy, very busy year. I think generally working 70, 80 hours a week at 21 and making not very much money, to be very honest. But it was a steep learning curve.
Is that part of the kind of, it's a interesting thing as well, because from my point of view, and I've known Mark for a long time as well, but like I've never had that type of there's been times in my life where I was unhappy or things weren't right, but it was never got to like a dark place. Like we've talked about on the podcast when I moved to Canada, and we were completely out of money when we first got there, and my wife was working at nighttime and I was working part-time during the day, so we were kind of like ships in the night. You know, it was kind of but it was very limited time. But I was not crazy happy at that time, but I always thought I was going to get better. And is that the biggest thing with mental health, that you think it's not going to get better? Is it that there's no future to see? Because I think me and Mark, we struggle to even understand that, because we were lucky enough to always have this kind of whatever. If it's bad, I feel like it's going to get better. It's almost like a tilt towards that. And is that when that tilt goes the other way? Is that like the trigger for these types of events, or is it chemical? What's the trigger for that?
Yeah, like it's a combination of a lot of things, to be very honest. Like, you know, being honest, I'm someone who growing up never really struggled. You know, in my teen years, you know, I would have had a good friendship group in school. You know, I played sports. I was always pretty active. I was a pretty confident guy. You know, I wouldn't have been, you know, someone who moped around and was feeling sorry for myself, or, you know, who had a lot of, you know, who you would have seen to be down or seen to be depressed potentially. And even into my college years, you know, I was generally a pretty happy guy, you know, and I never really had very severe issues. And the only way that I can describe it, is it's like psychosis is quite different to something like depression or anxiety, because depression and anxiety can kind of are fluid states that you can kind of come in and out of, and they're very, very challenging to deal with, but they're probably less acute in nature. Psychosis, it's essentially like you can't physically function in the day-to-day world. Like whenever you're in a psychotic episode, and generally speaking, people with bipolar, people with schizoaffective disorder, and a lot of different mental health disorders will go through episodes, as they're called, of psychosis. But essentially, like you don't function normally. Like your brain, a psychologist explained to me one day, a guy called Joe Griffin, who's I seen, who was saying that your brain can't decipher what's dream state versus reality. So all of a sudden, you don't know what's happening in day-to-day life. So you're unsure whenever I'm actually physically sitting here awake, you're unsure, am I actually sitting here awake, or is it a dream? And yeah, it's a very strange place to be at. But like generally speaking, it manifests in very negative, destructive thoughts. So for me, there was like paranoid delusions or negative delusions that people were going to harm me, or that I was going to harm myself. I think one thing that might sum it up, I remember like a feeling of like, I felt that worthless, that I thought that I wanted to be homeless and to be essentially like people to shun me when they walked past me. I felt that was how bad of a person that I thought I was in my own head, was that everyone physically in the world hated me and thought I was a piece of dirt. And therefore I wanted to be worse than that, even if that makes, I wanted, and it's very, very strange to explain. And I'm probably not even doing it justice, but it's a hard one to get around. And essentially, it was more so whenever I came out of that period, the preceding 6 months that followed were a very low depression. And the depression came out of hopelessness for the future. Because it was like, if I am going to suffer with that kind of an issue, and that maybe lasted 4 to 6 weeks, where I was essentially in that kind of a headspace where it's extremely negative, extremely challenging. The 6 months following was just like, I can never live. I was like, if I have to do that every year, like you can't hold down a full-time job. You can't, finish a university. You can't do your exams. You already had to defer your exams as it was. And it was just this feeling of hopelessness. It was just like, I am hopeless. I'm not a useful human. I would be better off to not be here. And, be better off for my family's sake, for, I was seeing a girl at the time, and I was like, she would be better off without me. It was, and, very, very negative thoughts about my life and about where I could go.
And is there, so with the work that you did afterwards, and maybe talked to a lot of different people that had different maybe challenges that they were working through, is there is there any advice that you'd give those guys? Would you say, like, definitely talk to a professional about that, or is it family and friends first? I always wonder. I'd say there's so many people out there that don't know which is the best way to do to go about that. Or a lot of people think, if I sweep this under the rug, maybe this will just go away. Do you know that kind of way as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Or?
Like it's a big thing that I try and talk about as often as I can, which is like encouraging people to talk, no matter what the situation is. It can only get progressively worse in your own head until you address it, until you essentially accepting it is also very important. It's very easy sometimes for someone else to see that someone is depressed or going through a low period, but you telling someone, oh mate, I think you look pretty depressed, maybe you should go and see someone, that's never really going to cut it, because they haven't yet accepted themselves that there's an issue there that they have to address. So I think it's understanding and saying like, okay, there's something not right with me right now. I don't really feel myself. I haven't felt myself for a while. And the first thing to do is essentially, generally, ideally, tell people that are close to you. And people are obviously generally very afraid of this, because like, oh, they're going to judge me. They're going to, say like this is unfair on them, whatever it might be. The truth is, people are very accepting and very supporting. People only ever want the best for their friends and their family, and therefore they're always going to be encouraging and positive in this situation. And it all of a sudden feels like a burden is taken off their shoulders, because all of a sudden this big mask that they've been putting on for so long, this persona that they're trying to live up to, even though they're suffering on the inside, all of a sudden that's gone, and they can just be real with themselves and say, no, actually, the last 6 months have been absolutely shit. I've been really struggling to get out of bed every morning. I'm considering quitting my job because I get no value from it. And my relationship is in the toilet because I haven't had any energy to give to it. And you said, look, that's okay. You can have that period, but you have to address it and try and move past it. And the next step is 100% going to speak to someone professionally. Whether that's a psychotherapist, a psychologist, going into hospital and seeing a psychiatrist, because they understand these things. They understand the psychological neural pathways in your mind and what's causing you to feel that way. And the thing with mental health as well, people often feel very guilty, because it's like, I have everything that I should need in life, and therefore, how can I be sad or how can I be depressed? It's like, it doesn't matter, and you can't compare yourself to, saying like, oh, there's kids starving in Africa and they have it so tough. Why am I sitting here in my lovely apartment in Dublin complaining about the fact that I don't feel happy, even though I'm going to have a great job and I'm paid well? Because it simply just isn't that straightforward. Like, if you are unwell and you're mentally unwell, you just are, and that's all there is to it. And accepting that and saying it's okay to be unwell for a little while is perfectly fine. And like, the other thing with as well is like, I think a lot of people talk about mental health as if it's something that you have it and then it's gone. Like, I still suffer with my mental health. Everyone has mental health and will go up and down with their mental health. And as you mentioned, whether that's that you go through a lower period, you might not be depressed or have to go on medication or see a therapist. Everyone goes through ups and downs. And I think therefore it's very important to understand where you're at all times. Check in with yourself and look at like, how am I doing? How is my life right now? How do I feel about things, my relationships, my family? And ultimately practice things that make you feel better. Like,
what
anyone that you speak to
that really got you out of that? Is there did you go into kind of like meditation? Was there any kind of process that you went through? Or is it?
Yeah, like meditation was never really sat with me. I've tried it quite a few times and done it quite a few times, but it's just something that hasn't been a big one for me. Like, therapy was definitely the number one positive, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is essentially looking at understanding your thoughts and essentially using a scientific approach to almost change them, or more so assess the reality behind them. So looking at, okay, I'm feeling like this. Why am I feeling like that? And is there any evidence to support that opinion? And that really helps, because I'm a very logical person. I was like, okay, no, that doesn't really make sense. Let's stop worrying about that. The next thing for me, it was like, people always say there's three core things of kind of health and well-being, which is your sleep, your nutrition, and your exercise. And it actually does just simply come down to those three things. If you are looking after yourself, like, sleep for me it was my number one trigger. If I didn't sleep, that was when I would really break down and go into low periods. But essentially, if you're sleeping properly and you're feeling energized and revived every day, that's a really big boost for your mind and a big boost for everything in your energy systems. The second one is looking for me is like, my meditation is exercise. Like, I would say people, I'm probably addicted to exercising because I know how positive it is for my mind. It's like, I know I'm someone that's like, I will train, 5-6 days most weeks, and physically, because I know it gives me such a boost in my energy. Like, and especially when it's gone into habit, like, if you train in the morning, your mind is in such a better positive place for the day, and that for me is a really positive thing. Whatever time of the day it suits you, but for me, it's like, try to do it in the mornings.
Can I ask you one question on that? I see people use that exercise as a a really beneficial tool to help with their mental health. Have you seen, I think I've seen it, I think it's quite obvious, some people use it as a crutch, and if they say get injured, they will fall deep back into the depression. How do you get around that? How do you not make it your crutch?
It's a very good question, and I'm not sure I have the answer, to be honest,
Mm.
because I think it's a very important crutch for a lot of people, and it can be people's sole release to get rid of that energy. And therefore, I think if someone gets an injury, I think there's always other ways that you can still train. You know, I fractured a bone in my knee last year in August. I was, couldn't do anything with my legs for probably 3 months in terms of physical exercise. And therefore, it was like I would still go to the gym 4 days a week and do upper body sessions with no legs involved, no cardio, no running, no cycling.
Mm.
And for me, it's like, but yeah, I agree. Like, I wouldn't say that it's a danger or that it's a bad thing to rely on exercise, because it's extremely beneficial to every single person, whether you have a challenge with your mental health or not. It's a really positive thing to have in your life, some form of physical exercise, both for the physical attributes or benefits in terms of reducing problems with like heart problems, obesity, all of these other physical factors, but also the mental stimulation that it gives someone. So I would encourage that, like, yeah, if you have an injury, if you hurt your elbow, you can still run, or if you hurt your leg, you can still do a few pull-ups or push-ups. There's always something that you can do.
Or yoga or Pilates or
bit of
something.
yoga, Pilates, yeah. And it doesn't have to be this go for an hour and a half gym session. Do a 15 or 20-minute hit session in the morning and just get your energy levels up. And that for me is kind of the key point. Is like, I don't think you should sacrifice exercise for anything. I don't think it's a bad thing to have it as an important part of your structure and your day-to-day. And yeah, that would be my advice.
It's interesting. I think that I get different feelings from different types of workouts. This is what I've been noticing, because I've been doing I was just talking to Ogie before this about the Ironman training that I'm doing, and how at the beginning of May when I started, I couldn't swim in the sea properly at all, and now I'm doing lengths, and it's become my favorite form of exercise. And this is so strange, because it's what most people hate about triathlon. Not hate, but it's the one that what puts people off doing triathlons, is the swimming. Everyone I talk to has always said, I'd love to do that, but I couldn't do the 2K swim at the beginning. But there's something when you go swimming, especially we're talking about the morning. Sometimes I go before work, if it's not too choppy or whatever. And the whole day, it's like I'm floating for the whole day. It's I feel completely different than if I went for even a run or a cycle or lifting weights or anything like that. There's something about being in the water. It's like this weird connection with the nature. I feel like I'm part of
like a shark.
I feel like a shark, Mark. You know what I mean? Like, so, no, it's hard to explain, and it sounds. I feel like this sounds ridiculous, but it's there is some sort of high that I'm getting from being in the water for that long, for up to an hour, without panicking. It's like you get into a rhythm, and it's like
a flow state.
Flow state. There's no earphones. There's no music pushing you. You're just literally it's like nothing. You're just floating in space, So I'd recommend people get into that if they're looking for that type of high. But like you said beforehand, some people are sinkers. I've got I was never a strong swimmer beforehand, but I've got the most buoyant of any I think of anyone ever. I could never float. I would never sink.
It's your barrel chest.
I don't know what it is. I just sit there and I just bob up and down. If I get tired, I just stop moving and nothing happens. I'm just completely flat. So it's a strange thing, but anyway.
So Ogie, you mentioned, I think it was 3 things. So you think you talked about 2. What would be the third?
Yeah, I think the final one is just like nutrition or what you're eating. And like, I think the fuel that you feed yourself is very, very important. And that for me is kind of the third pillar that I kind of live by. And for me, it's a funny one, because as you mentioned around like an over-reliance, like I definitely would be extremely rigorous in my kind of habits and routines. And I've kind of got to a place where I feel like I need to. So that's definitely something that I'm trying to address, is like, can I be a little bit easier on myself more often? Can I go for a weekend away without being too concerned about the fact if I don't sleep properly, I'm going to feel bad for the week afterwards? Or can I take 2 days off the gym and not feel guilty that I haven't trained for those days and still be kind of optimally quite well? Or, can I eat bad food at the weekend and not feel like it's going to impact my moods or whatever? So it is a process. And I think that's something which, like, at the very, very start, like I remember like the year after I kind of went through all those experiences, it was like everything was so by the book. I was like, I have to sleep 8 hours every single night. I have to eat really good food every day, and I have to train every day.
That was your
And that was my mental kind of toolkit. But that also becomes exhausting in a sense, like, because as you said, like, Mark, it's like if you're trying to live by these ideals every single day, you almost forget to live. You almost forget to actually look at the enjoyment in your life and the hobbies that you enjoy doing, the people you enjoy seeing. And I do think that's a real danger, especially when people maybe get really into fitness or really into health. It's like, oh wait, no, I can't go out and have a nice meal, or I can't have a beer, or whatever it might be. And like alcohol is definitely a very negative substance. It's a depressant. But if you do it in moderation, you can have a few beers at the weekend with your mates. You're not getting absolutely smashed for 3 days in a row. It's very much okay. And I think that's what I've kind of slowly tried to reintroduce into my life again, is like, okay, go for a weekend away with the lads, go and enjoy yourself, have a few beers, and also go easy on yourself if you're not at your peak performance for the week following, because I think especially working in sales, you're always expected to be operating at 110%. You're always working towards targets. You're always in this really high motivation environment. And sometimes, I personally set myself very high standards, and therefore it's like, I will give myself shit if I'm not performing at that level on a Monday after I've been away for a weekend. It's like, no, wait a minute, Ogie. You always perform at a very high level. Your performance ratings, your targets, everything says that. Therefore, you can allow yourself a Monday to take it easy and go for 3 coffee breaks and block your calendar out for half an hour, because you don't need to have that call with a client until Tuesday. And that's something that I think is going to come with time. And it's an ever evolving process. And I think everyone is always trying to find that pivotal point of balance. Everyone talks about balance and how important balance is, and it definitely is, but we probably obsess on it too much. And I think it's just like, do what makes you feel good more often than not, is kind of what I try and do. It's like, and if you stay by that, you're generally going to feel pretty good. If you tip it too far the wrong side and you're enjoying yourself too much and forgetting about all of those routines, you're probably going to slip into a low place. But vice versa, if you're spending way too long trying to be the perfect person and have your health and well-being and exercise and sleep in 100% sync, your social life is probably going to fall to shit. And therefore relationships, family, everything else as a result of that becomes affected. And they're also a really big part of your holistic well-being. So it's like, there's a lot of different moving parts that are always happening and occurring at the same time. And that's kind of how I would look at it.
Like, I think it's a really good tip there, just to be good to yourself a little bit, or to go easy on yourself. I think, so I think she's always pushing you to be too good to yourself, Mark. Do you know what I mean? It's very, very much just take it easy. It's going to be fine. Don't worry, have a cake, whatever. But it's funny that you said about that.
It's nice to hear that though, when you have probably the mindset that me and you do, kind of all go, would be quite hard on ourselves. And then someone just goes, it'd be grand, just do it tomorrow.
Yeah. Because I remember, Ogie, you touched on something there with the tech sales thing. I love being in technology sales. It's been something that I've been lucky to get into at this stage. But there are people are fucking very hard on themselves when they don't. Some people that are, like you said, like if you just look at the metrics of their general performance, they're doing great, but they might have one bad month. I remember I was walking through, and it wasn't in HubSpot, it was in another company I was working in, and I was walking through the sales floor, and there was a girl there who was a killer. She was a incredible salesperson, right? Great numbers. She's probably, I guess she might have been like 23 or 24, and probably, she's making 6 figures selling technology. She's doing just fine. Do you know what I mean? And it was the last day of the month, and like we were kind of going out for there was like something organized afterwards for the end of the month. So we're going out, I was like coming out, and she'd start bawling, crying, and I was just like, what's wrong? I thought someone had died or something. And then she's like, no, I didn't hit my target for this month. I've hit my target like 20 months in a row or something crazy. And I was just like, I go, I didn't mean this to lessen this, but I said to her, that the quota is made up. It's not real. Like, you just do your best. Whether you get the quota is something that someone just came up with. It could have been lower, it could have been higher. But your happiness shouldn't be on a figure. You know that you're doing your best. If it didn't work out, it didn't work out. But I always think that put the salespeople the crushing number, and then the forecast. Give me your forecast. I'll hold you to that. What do you mean hold me to it? But I'm going to try to make as much money as I can. I just think sometimes, I know we're trying to push people in technology, and right now I'm kind of in a way managing 8 different sales teams all over EMEA. So I'm trying to keep them motivated, and I need to get the forecast from them now. So I kind of see it from the other side now. But I think there's a lot of pressure in the sales game, so it's important to say, put things in perspective if you can, or zoom out,
Yeah, big
But,
time, big time.
that's my 2 cents on that. So we are actually at 3/4 an hour here, and we wanted to pick your brain. We might change gears a little bit here on the experience that you've had in Google. So when you get to what was your, did you go straight into Google from what you were doing, or did you have a tech sales job before you got in there? Or how did you get into the kind of Google space?
Yeah, no, so I kind of fast tracked the middle few years here, but essentially, after the year at the startup and the few different companies in Galway, I was like, okay, I need to go and pursue my degree and get a real job, as I call it. So I studied finance, went into banking, worked with BNY Mellon in the kind of corporate fund side of things for about a year or so. And then from there, I transitioned to Google, and it was something that I planned to do previously, but just didn't have a contact, couldn't get a way in. Ended up adding a person on LinkedIn who was a manager on the team about a year previously, but never had the courage to write to them. And the year later, they posted something up, a job posting, and I was like, you know what? Why not just drop a message, see what happens, send over my CV. And she was like, yeah, look, really like your CV, really like your experience. Love to have a chat with you. Met her for a coffee initially, and she's like, yeah, look, I'll put you through for a referral. I think you'd be a really good fit for the company. And yeah, essentially went through the interview process, which was, it was rigorous in a sense in terms of the number of interviews, but none of them were like overly challenging or like, trying to really put you under pressure. It's very much trying to understand your skill set and get the best from you. I think it was like 5 interviews in total, upon entry. And yeah, from there, I think that was, but I've with Google nearly 3.5 years now. And yeah, being very honest, I didn't know what PPC stood for, pay-per-click advertising. I didn't know what it meant before I interviewed for Google. I had done a general business degree. I did kind of marketing for my 3rd year ordinary degree, and then I did finance for my honours degree. And yeah, to be honest, what really drew me to it was when I was in Galway in the enterprise center. I used to work with a lot of startups, a lot of small companies, and we used to run a mentoring program. So I love that side of enterprise, love talking to business owners and kind of seeing how they're growing their business. And Google gave me the opportunity to tie my kind of analytical and skill set to working with enterprises and working with companies to help them grow. And that kind of was really what drew me to the role itself. Is like, we work in advertising sales, but essentially the core of my job is helping e-commerce businesses in the UK grow their market share and grow their market cap. So that for me, I think it was a really interesting drive. And yeah, I've been there ever since, and like enjoying it. I'm exploring some things at the moment in other areas in terms of what I'm doing with myself. But yeah, no, that's where I'm at.
The pay-per-click, it's a great, I guess, industry for pay-per-click because it's, you can tie it to ROI quite well. Like I work with companies for digital marketing as well, and in HubSpot we manage advertising across platforms, and it's for the B2B sales and stuff like that. It is a little bit trickier you have to have a different mindset. I think it's not going to be tying exactly, we spent X, we got X back. It's very difficult to kind of nail down. But in e-commerce, I like the way it's, you can have a little bit more of a path to, they saw this ad, then they bought this pair of shoes or, whatever. So when you talk to, say, kind of companies that are trying to level up, what's the most important thing that they can do? Is it simply put as much money as possible as they can afford, or is it the creative element? What's going to make the difference? I know it's a huge question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, right? So like, I'm going to split it into 2 parts, right? So the first one for me, right, is performance marketing in terms of Google, which is pay-per-click, essentially with shopping ads and search ads, right? So essentially someone searches in the browser for a product and we serve them an ad of that product and the providers who sell it. And that is a money-making machine. Like, it is direct ROI on the table. You pay this for a click, we will drive you a sale and we'll give you money in the bank. And it genuinely works extremely well. The other side of things, though, is brands can become over-reliant on that and not look at building a brand. And when that happens, you get to a very dangerous point where your over-reliance on media spend is only on direct response or kind of sales activation activities. And when you rely heavily on sales activation, you're very susceptible to competition. And therefore, if competitors are trying to push pressure on that auction or those ad auctions, all of a sudden it becomes very hard for you to compete. And all of a sudden your margins get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. Mm. And that's where essentially having a brand presence and having, more to your story and communicating your brand very effectively and building customer loyalty is what's going to succeed in the long run. And I've seen this in one industry. I'll just use as an example. if you look at in the UK, the e-commerce market for online books, right? So there's probably 6 to 8 medium-sized book resellers in the UK who, you know, would have dominated the marketplace before Amazon entered. And generally speaking, very few of those brands had a very strong brand presence, right? So people go to look for a book, they know what book they're looking to buy, and they then essentially land on whichever seller has that book for them at generally the cheapest price, because it's the exact same book. And all of a sudden, they're all competing for this ad space. They're all competing to serve their ads on the top of Google listings. And they're working off quite small margins. Book industry doesn't have massive margins. All of a sudden, what happens if those companies haven't built a brand, which a lot of them didn't, no one is going to them organically, and no one is searching for their brand term to drive traffic to their website to buy from them through the fact that they know that they're a reputable and really great book reseller. They're just going to Google every time, and they go back to Google and search for the latest book that they're trying to buy. And when Amazon came into the marketplace and put a lot of pressure on those auctions, for example, it became very, very challenging for these small independent book resellers to still stay competing, because they all essentially have the even market share or opportunity to show an ad, but so does Amazon, and so does any other big player who comes into that market. So like Amazon are a very, very powerful player in the e-commerce space. And when they come and put pressure into auctions, if you haven't built a credible brand and you haven't differentiated yourself enough, it's going to be very challenging for customers to still want to go to you. When essentially what Amazon are doing in that sense is they're trying to acquire customers to Prime, right? So they're trying to acquire customers to sign up to Prime, then they'll use free delivery. They don't mind if they lose money or make very, very small margins on a book that they sell. It's more about the long-term play, because they know how much value a customer has for them long-term. Whereas the small independent players are more reliant on the direct ROI from that sale. And like, it's a discussion that I very regularly have with clients. Is like, you might be making a lot of money right now. Like, we have clients who will make 10, 15, even 20 times the one on their investment from direct response advertising. Like, it's very, very lucrative. And generally speaking, you get to a certain point of saturation. You get to a certain point where you know you have a decent product offering, you know you're at a decent price point, and you know that there's a decent customer base who are searching for your products, and you can sell at a decent ROI. Whenever you then have 2 choices, right? So if you want to continue to grow as a business, you either look at how do you increase your product offering to get more coverage in those queries, or can you afford to decrease your margin to drive more top line revenue growth? And this is where the kind of tipping point as such comes. Like, there's always a point of saturation where that kind of diminishing returns will start to occur. And it's an interesting avenue, because like, for me, it's like, okay, at that point, or actually ideally before that point, you should really start investing quite heavily in brand and building that brand presence, because then you have loyalty, and then you have people who are returning to buy from you specifically, as opposed to just looking at products. And look, this obviously depends on what you're selling, because if you have a completely undenominated product and you are selling the exact same as other resellers, it's very, very hard to build a brand as such, apart from being synonymous with providing good customer service and having good website functionality. Whereas if you have something that actually has a presence and has a unique offering, then a brand is obviously, again, can be much, much stronger in that space. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I got on a bit of a tangent, but it's
great to have an insight in what's going on there. To take one of your points and run with it, if you had a couple of million to start not a couple 100,000 to start a business, and you wanted to game the system is the wrong word, but set up your business, or set up your branding or your product offering in a way that would be the most beneficial for pay-per-click. This might be the way, Mark, this might be the wrong way to set up a business.
No, it's a good question.
Let's say if we were building a machine to best take advantage of this way of doing business with pay-per-click advertising, what industry or what type of product that would be, or what would you say, like a subscription model? What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, right? So I'm gonna, again, so there's, with the way I would segment it, right, is 2 different business types. You're gonna have e-commerce and lead generation. For e-commerce, you're looking at product development and coming up with a product. So there's 2 sides to this. It's either you become innovative and you come up with a new product that there isn't necessarily demand for, and you have to create that demand. That's something which, being honest, from the onset, there isn't going to be much value from driving PPC on Google, because there isn't people going to search your product. On the flip side, if you look at trying to capture a trend and look at what is there already seriously high demand for and people are searching for and want to buy, and can you sell that to them? And can you sell it to them competitively at a decent rate? And therefore, you're essentially automatically entering into a marketplace where you know there's demand for that product. There is competitors, but you know there's also a lot of customers who are willing to buy. And therefore, you have as much chance as anyone else does whenever it comes to that search auction. Because once your landing page is relevant, your product is relevant, and your customer experience is good, you're going to have a list of essentially 4 or 5 brands serving search advertising, and then you're going to have shopping listings across the top with the product. So that, if you want to look at the easiest way to enter a market and drive sales, it's look at what's already working and what there's already demand for. If you want to look at long-term success, so like essentially that'd be like, if you want to make a quick buck, that's what I would look at doing. If you want to look at long-term success, I would be looking at more of having a unique offering and building a brand around it, which is going to take longer to invest up front. You're going to look at YouTube advertising, social advertising, and kind of tell that story to those customers and really engross them in that journey, and then use PPC to activate and drive those sales once there's demand built up. The other side of the business, which is an interesting one to look into, is lead generation. Lead generation is a way that people make very lucrative amounts of money, because lead generation, you don't need to have a physical product. You don't even really need to have a physical business. You can essentially be 3 or 4 guys running a really effective lead generation website and then selling those leads on to providers. So insurance, lending, healthcare, a number of different industries in the lead gen space are very lucrative because they're also very competitive, right? So like I worked with, say, for example, in the past, like insurance lead gen providers. And what they essentially do is they'll set up an aggregator site where they will they get listed as an aggregator. They don't provide any insurance products themselves, but they essentially compare prices or get quotes for bigger insurance companies. Insurance companies will pay quite a premium for a qualified lead or a customer who's came through, given their information to one of these providers. And therefore, there's essentially automatic dynamic auctions that are happening on the back end, where these are buying and reselling loans to insurance companies. It's a very competitive industry because a lot of people already know this. Like this is not like some new information that I'm sharing here for the first time. There is a lot of space, especially in the UK. Like I've seen lead gen finance clients going from spending 50 grand a month on Google advertising to spending 2 million a month on Google advertising. And that's simply the scalability of how quickly you can grow a lead gen business if you can do it effectively. And it's all about conversion rates. It's all about, you're going to pay a real premium to get a customer onto your website. Now, let's just say, for example, you could be paying €10 per click onto your website. That's a premium to get a customer there. You are essentially needing to convert that customer at about a 40% conversion rate in order to drive profit. 40% conversion rate on site is extremely high. You'll know that from HubSpot working in that space. And therefore, in order to do that, you obviously have to have a very efficient website, and you have to be serving against really relevant terms that are going to drive that action on the website whenever they get there. And even then, you're working at really small margins, and that's why you have to scale very quickly in order to make actual profit. So that's kind of the 3 different opportunities there. So like short-term cash, go after a product that already has demand and sell it and have a good offering of that same product. Long-term, grow a brand and have a unique product offering, but you need to grow a brand first as opposed to just relying on PPC, or focus on the lead gen side of the business. If you want to activate quick, build a really functioning lead gen site, really good back-end relationships with providers, either in loans or insurance, and then essentially generate leads through really highly relevant terms that people are looking for, and then essentially sell them on to the providers.
It's so interesting that you said that last one as well, because we had this, me and Mark, we were kind of going a little bit stir crazy when it was proper lockdown, when you couldn't leave the 2K. We were going a little bit mad, and I think we did like a 2-hour podcast, just 2 of us on, we call it the post-COVID idea cast, where we were just going back with ideas. And one of the ones that I thought about was that this kind of lead gen business as well. And I was trying to, Mark, you know what, we didn't really figure it out on the podcast, but maybe we'll take that offline. And we had some bad ideas, let's say, when I listened back, but there were some good ideas, there's some gems in there as well. But because I remember I worked for a company when I first got to Canada that was, we talked about before, but they sold, what would you call them? Like electronic stair lifts, for elderly or disabled people. So I was a salesperson for that. And we used to buy leads from these kind of aggregator sites or whatever. And I told Mark that it was about $980 or something we pay for a fucking lead. And like the price of one of these things is like 15 grand. So it's 15x if it closes. So I get it. But when they told me, so when people were complaining, the salespeople were complaining about leads, our manager was like, you have to call these people into the ground because we're paying $1,000 for every they were getting. So my point is there is a lot of opportunity out there. And also, like, it doesn't have to be on the face of that looks a little bit, not dodgy, but a little bit, kind of like you're not doing the actual service yourself. But I think there can be a value in sending people to the right kind of vendor. It doesn't have to be kind of a sleazy thing. You can actually say, okay, we only work with really good businesses that are going to serve the people that we're working with or that we're generating money from. So like, I think that there's something in that, and I think the scalability, if you do it right, could be there as well. So I really like that one. Mark, we need to talk.
Yeah, no, Ogie, I think I'd say a lot of Google AdWords customers come and go very quickly, and they try and they give up. They don't. I've used it a good few times, different companies, and there's probably different reasons why it fails for some people. Probably you don't structure their campaign properly. Maybe don't take the advice that's offered on board. Probably or simply just don't understand. But I think a big thing is actually being afraid to put money into it. So that's the elephant in the room. How much money do you actually need? Like, I know it's a big question and it's going to differ, but like, do you ever see some companies spending hardly anything and converting well, or do you actually have to have a few grand a month that you're going to commit? Let's use, for an example, selling my artwork online or limited edition prints. If I was to use Google AdWords campaign, how much money would I really need to put in?
It's a very good question. It's a challenging question to answer because it's obviously very different across every industry, right? So the big thing that I would look at, right, is how do you track and what are you trying to achieve, right? So if you're an e-commerce business and you're trying to drive online sales, understanding what return on ad spend that you need to get from that. So for example, if you're looking for a 5-to-1 to make profit, that is a really good benchmark to then say, okay, if we have really solid tracking set up on the back end for e-commerce, which is so easy to do within Google Ads, you can then say, okay, for every £10 that I put into this platform, I'm getting back 50 in sales. And all of a sudden, you can say that, okay, let's just do that £10 a day and try and get one sale a day. There's not much scale to that, and there's not much volume of data running through the account. So it's going to struggle to really ramp up, and it's going to struggle to guarantee you that one sale every day. Generally speaking, we would try and look at something that would drive about 20 sales a day as a decent starting point, right? So if you're looking at that, you're then looking at kind of a £200 a day budget in order to kind of drive that return on investment. And that could be on a small, unique kind of group of product offerings. Essentially, the big thing with it is that it can be done at any scale. And the reason that is you have complete fairness and equality to enter into an ad auction, no matter how big your overall budget is based on the CPC for that auction. So if you're only willing to pay for 10 customers a day in terms of clicks, you'll only get 10 customers a day, but you will still compete those 10 times that you show up. You're still going to serve an ad on that search listings results and essentially have the same chance as one of those bigger competitors, for example, getting that click to your website versus theirs. It then does come down to like people often really underestimate the website experience and the customer experience and reviews and things like this, because customers, as you can see, have so much access to information and data that they don't just go and buy something, especially something out of the blue, especially if it's a larger ticket item. They're going to compare, they're going to contrast across different sites. And price is a really big sticking point, but things like free delivery are like over 80% of people in the furniture industry cite free delivery as their biggest impacting factor on buying cycles, which people are like, furniture is obviously a very expensive item, so shipping can be very expensive if it's not offered for free. But often people will have really heavy discounts but still charge delivery fees. It's like, do you realize if you actually didn't charge any discount but gave free delivery, your conversion rates would be substantially higher? And there's different nuances like that people wouldn't be aware of. But yeah, honestly, there is no set amount, there is no starting point. The more that you have, the quicker that you can scale is ultimately, and it's the same with anything, but it comes down to the pivotal point is making your website convert and getting the right traffic there. So if you're targeting the right terms or the right products, you need that traffic that's landing on your website to actually transact and purchase, because we can send loads of traffic. Like that's one thing that Google has no shortage of is people searching on their browsers. So we can, there's millions upon millions of customers who are searching on Google, but it's all about, can we actually offer them what they want whenever they come to the platform, and can we serve them an ad that's relevant, bring them to our website and get them to buy our product? And that's where, for me, it is the pivotal point of, like, if you're starting anything, doing something that there's people already searching for and they're looking for what you want to sell, as opposed to trying to convince them of something to buy that they didn't want to buy in the first place.
Yeah, well, I use Shopify for my website, so that kind of takes, in my opinion, that takes care of the user experience and purchasability. So
you could probably, like, if you like on your point, Mark, it's like you want to have that mindset of, okay, I'm someone who searched for this. I click through. What happens then? Am I served up something that's really easy to like a let's just, I know not to cut into margin so it's not profitable for you, but say if, just for your print business, let's say you offer them a first time thing of X% off, or if you send it to a friend, we'll give you X amount or something, like kind of like a pop-up that they see straight away. So it's an easy thing for them to buy. They get value straight away. And then you can nurture them through the emails that you collect, for example. Something. So instead of right now, when people go to an art website, they might be looking for a gift. There's probably a lot of the traffic that you would be getting. People trying to find something that, especially because you're doing a lot of celebrity stuff. So if they go there and they've got 50 things that they might buy, it's hard for them ever, like if there's 2 things that they can buy, X or Y, that might be a better converter than having 50 things. I don't know. Okay, am I way off here? I may be.
No. So like the one thing that I would look at there, right, is, so yeah, if you're trying to sell art online, right, the chances are, right, that the pool of people who are out there looking for exactly what you sell right now might be small. So therefore, you're having to try and expand the coverage, as Luke alluded to there, like maybe going into gifting terms. So then all of a sudden you're looking for like gifts for Father's Day, gifts for him, gifts for her, birthday gifts, and because that term in nature is very generic, you could be looking for any amount of different products. You're essentially looking for inspiration or ideas, but it's essentially quite an upper funnel term, which means that the conversion rates on a term like that are obviously much lower, but it can be valuable down the funnel. And that's kind of where it just gets challenging, because as I mentioned earlier on, right, you generally will always have a set group of terms that will drive really strong value. And depending on the industry you're in, that group can be really small or niche, or it can be much larger. And it's ultimately about like, how do you go beyond that niche, right? So if you guarantee that you have, say, like 5 terms that drive, someone is searching for exactly what you sell, they're going to buy it, or there's a really high chance they're going to buy it. But whenever you start going into broad terms around like gifting products or, inspirational ideas, the chance of that actual sale happening becomes much, much less. And as you mentioned, it's all about then, where does that profitability scale come, and how far can you push without your margins being essentially diminished? And that's really the challenging tipping point of things that, and being very honest, like that's, if it is at that point that maybe there isn't that much demand right now on Google for it in terms of PPC, there's other avenues that you can look into, like social is a really strong platform in that space. So if it's a product that you're trying to put on someone that they're not aware of yet, and therefore you need to show them the product and you need to give them information about it to encourage them then to come back, we can then serve them that product on social, and use something like a remarketing list. So track that user when they come to your website, tag them with a remarketing list, and all of a sudden when they then search for gifts for a birthday, we're then going to serve that same customer who's already been to your website through the Facebook ad, but we're going to then serve them an ad again. And all of a sudden, because that person's been to your site, the chance of them converting on that birthday term is substantially higher than just a random person searching for a birthday gift for the first time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. So that's it's about commitment then to the long-term play, kind of getting it's not, okay, maybe they didn't convert the first time they went to the website, but we're going to, it's not the end, it's not the last time they hear of us, right? Just on the kind of conversion piece, I saw something really interesting. This is not so relevant, but when we're thinking about getting people to actually convert and buy things on websites, it's got to be as easy as possible, right? It's got to be so, like, if you have lots of stuff to go through, a lot of hoops to go through, it makes it more difficult. I've abandoned so many things when I had to think twice about it. So I came across this wish.com or Wish app. Yeah, they sell like really cheap stuff, but like, in volume. And I thought they did something really, really clever. When I signed up, I forget why. I think it was just through an ad, but anyway, I signed up for it and they said, okay, we'll send you some free earphones. Right. And I was like, okay, that sounds okay. You just got to pay for shipping. The shipping's $2 or something. I'm like, okay, I've got $2 to spend on some free earphones for sure. And the reviews on the earphones are all very good and all that type of stuff. So you go in, they get your credit card details, right? So they have your credit card details. The next time you go in, I bought some cycling spandex that Mark's going to make fun of me for. And it was one click, just slide across to buy. And I was just like, this is genius. I need to get this fucking phone away from me because I'm about to buy all this stuff from China. Just swiping, I think And I know maybe that's not something that we could do with the Prince website, but it is something to think about. Say, how are we going to just make this just easy, right? Anytime I need to get my credit card number and flip it over, and any type of sticking point is that is tough.
Like, and that's the thing. Like, Shopify is an amazing platform in that capacity because it has it all automatically already plugged in. It has all the ecom best practices that we would be advising every client. They pretty much have it already there for you in a very easy to use and an easy format. Like, the key things, as you mentioned, is like card autofill. If you don't have card autofill on your website in these days, you are losing so many customers because people are so impatient. The other thing, again, address autofill. Like, no one wants to go and type in their address every single time they land to a website. So therefore, everyone has it saved in their browser, they have it saved in their phone browser, one click, add address, and it's done. And those little things that people, in a lot of traditional websites that are maybe built on Magento and built on different platforms like that, still don't have some of those functionalities built in. And they're losing so many conversions every single day just because customers get frustrated. And the reality is there's a competitor who also sells it and they will just jump and buy from them.
Absolutely.
Ogie, sorry. Just from working where you work and dealing with all the different businesses that you deal with, is there any kind of interesting or unique or lucrative kind of businesses that you've come across that you wouldn't have thought of, or have you ever seen anything? I don't know if you use Google Trends much or anything, or how important that is, but anything kind of out there that we can look at.
Mark, I love the entrepreneurial mindset. He's a man for business idea.
That's good.
It's an interest. Like, being honest, there's nothing that stands out as like this is an easy money making machine. Like, there's the reality of it is setting up a business in any capacity is challenging. Like, there's a lot of fundamental challenges on the back end in terms of supply chain, sourcing, products, customer service that people often kind of, I'd say, underestimate the importance of. And like, ultimately, like, I've heard some really inspirational stories, right? So like, one I'll kind of give you is like Joe Bulk Powders, the sports supplements brand. So they'd be probably number 2 in the UK to My Protein. So I worked very closely with them for about 2 years, and they've been on a fantastic trajectory over the last number of years. They were 2 guys who, at 21 years of age in university, started importing supplements from the US before the UK really had a protein market, and just started reselling it online. They did that for about 3 years. Then they realized, we could actually probably manufacture these products in the UK and increase our margins essentially on what we're selling. And they went about it. They did it. They set up their own brand. They set up a manufacturing plant in Colchester. And now they essentially make a large array of sports nutrition and sports supplementation products in the UK. And they also have a factory in Europe. And they now ship to most countries in Europe. And like, that is a story of 2 very normal guys, very, very bright guys, Adam and Elliot, the 2 founders that I worked with. And these guys are doing very well for themselves now. They have a business that's turning over a very substantial sum of money every year. Google advertising is a big source of advertising for them because there's so much demand for protein products. So if you think about it, anyone who goes to look for a new protein, a new creatine, whatever it might be, they generally go to Google and search for like whey protein, and like whey protein, really competitive term. But again, on that point, right, if a new protein brand comes into the market and just says, oh, we're going to start selling protein tomorrow, they don't have the brand equity to convert customers. They'll serve, like, whey protein is very similar. It's essentially a byproduct of milk, and it's very easy to produce, and it's very, very similar in consistency no matter who produces it. They're all pretty much very similar products. But when a new competitor enters, if they're serving just on like whey protein, which is a really competitive term, it doesn't really convert that well. Whereas because, for example, like Bulk Powders and My Protein have built really strong brands in this space, all of a sudden, whenever someone sees Bulk Powders, they click on their ad because they know that they're reputable. And they are essentially looking at driving that lifetime value, because that industry is something people buy on a monthly basis. They continue to come back again and again and again. And it really is, it's that long-term vision around like, how do we, source the right products initially, and then from there, how do we sell to the right consumers? And then how do we build a brand around that to kind of continue that loop? And I think it's something which, like, I'm very similar to yourself, Mark. Like, I have lots of kind of passion project interests around like entrepreneurship and setting a business on the side. And it's a very, very challenging space. Like, I think if you look at like the print on demand side of things, which is a big trend right now in the US and the UK, like, there's people that are making lucrative money from that. But generally speaking, it's a short-term play that you might get a few months out of on a certain product, and then you have to flip it to a new product and try and push that on people, and it's essentially this kind of ever evolving like flipping things that are not really great quality. You're not putting in the manufacturing expertise. You're not really, putting that investment behind it. You're entering something very easily. There's very low barriers to entry to those type of product offerings. But there's very little unique about them. And therefore, as you said, like if you're just serving, a t-shirt with a print on it on a Google ad, the chance of someone buying that t-shirt if they're searching for a generic t-shirt is very, very slim. And that's why like social works quite well for those things. If you can find a unique, something unique, if you're looking at something in the fitness space, try and hone in on, say, CrossFitters and give them a CrossFit specific t-shirt. And try and really target that niche audience of like CrossFitters. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, we've got a CrossFit based t-shirt. We set up a Shopify website that's really simple to set up. We have 10 product offerings. Everything is print on demand. We don't even have to touch the stock. It sounds like the dream. And in some ways it can be, and it can work. But I think it's very hard to find the right product, the right niche, and something that will actually deliver a positive ROI. Because the thing with all of these kind of business types is the margins seem very high up front because the cost of production is very low, but the cost of advertising is very high because there's very little demand for it. And therefore, we're trying to really create this demand for these product offerings that people don't necessarily want, but we're essentially trying to convince them to get that they do, or to kind of push it upon them. And all of a sudden, I'm sure if you're very aware, like the marketing costs get pushed very, very high very quickly, and that break-even point all of a sudden gets very, very close. And it's an interesting space. And like I'm not saying there's so many people who have cracked it and are making great money through, print on demand and drop shipping and all these different kind of initiatives. But they're very different to building a brand, I would say. And that's something that like any company that we work with, they're really reputable brands who have this expertise. They have really strong teams that are built up who understand what they're doing. And, they wouldn't stand behind the drop shipping business because delivery times are taking 30 odd days. The customer service is terrible because you're dealing with likes of AliExpress. The markup is high, very, very high on the initial price, but the marketing spend is also very high, and therefore that cuts your margins. And it's a very, like I think there's thousands of YouTubers who will screenshot their 100K month in sales. Like what proportion of that is actual profit? I would often be very, very skeptical.
I'm actually allergic now to the drop ship model. And when I was in college, I was doing well. I set up, it was on eBay. It was kind of the big thing at the time, right? So I was doing a lot of eBay stuff. And I remember telling Mark I was going to buy a house and stuff after the 2 months of it up and running. But then there was returns. It was just imploded. The stress, I can't tell you the stress because I'm not in control of the shipping. People are coming in. They've paid good money for stuff. It's really on me to provide the... I wouldn't do the drop shipping again. It was just a little bit tough there. I know some people make money, like you said, like in anything. If you've thought about it, if you've got a brand and you've got like some sort of uniqueness about it, then that's fine as well. But the bulk powder example is really interesting because I was trying to sell HubSpot a couple of years ago to this guy in, I think it was Sweden. I can't remember the name of the business, but he was selling these types of things as well. And he was quite a young guy. I think he was in his mid-20s. And he was using Klaviyo at the time. So I was trying to get him to leave Klaviyo and come to HubSpot. So he did a screen share of his Klaviyo account that's hooked up with all of his advertising and sales and everything like that. And it almost made me cry how much money was coming in. Like I was like, I don't know what to do. You're fine. You don't need HubSpot. That's basically what it came to. I'm like, what am I going to do? You're doing just fine, right? But his whole thing was everyone else is trying to sell bulk protein. That's what they're going after. But he was going after weight management. That's where all of his stuff was coming in. So people who wanted to either gain weight or lose weight, but they'd come in and then they'd also buy protein. It was he was going after, I can't remember exactly. He told me what the keyword or the what he was going after, but it was something like that. And he had, I think it was 10 people working there and like millions and millions of krona coming in off the back of that. And I was just like, I don't know what to do with you. Keep on keeping on and then hang up. Like that's what I was like, I can't help you. Okay. So we're pushing the time here, Mark. Why don't we could talk about this all day, this type of stuff. Why don't we do some lightning round stuff and give Ogie some of his Saturday back here.
Yeah. I was going to say,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, but before we jump into lightning round, I was going to give like 3 or 4 kind of tips maybe for people who are very, very early days into Google advertising, and maybe a few ideas of like where to get started, what to look for, and what you might have.
I was just going to ask you that.
We'd love that.
we're on the same page today. Yeah, right. So I'm going to run through them really quickly, right? So first things first is understanding what you want to achieve. So essentially conversion tracking, what is the action on your website that you want someone to complete? Is that a purchase? Is it a lead form? Is it a phone call? And ensuring that you have that really clear before you start advertising, because it's crucial that you get that right and that you have it tracked, because essentially everything else is going to be underpinned by that end result. And that's kind of pivotal to the success of any online advertising. The second one is, in terms of if you're trying to understand how to find what people are searching for, there's a tool in Google Ads called Keyword Planner, right? So it's in a Google Ads account called Keyword Planner. And Keyword Planner essentially allows you to put in one term, and it will then give you similar terms to that and tell you the volume of searches on those terms every month. So it's a really quick way to say how much demand is there for these different search queries in Ireland, UK, whatever market you want to look at. So really, really useful tool whenever you're setting up campaigns as to what keywords you should be targeting and what demand there is for them. So that's Keyword Planner. The next one is a tool called Performance Planner. So whenever you have a campaign set up and it's running, Performance Planner will let you estimate the potential ROI for that campaign based on different goals. So for example, we talked about the diminishing returns curve. It will essentially give you that from an advertising standpoint. So to your point earlier on, Mark, around how much do you need to spend in order to be successful, this will essentially give you a scale of, if you're spending this right now, this is how much you're getting in return. If you spend in a kind of a straight line analysis, this is where you'll get to a point of diminishing returns, and this is how much you can generate in sales from those terms. That has to have information in the account for it to work, in terms of it has to have historical conversions there to judge that off. But that's a really useful tool to essentially analyze the potential growth of a campaign, essentially depending on the budgets and the targets that you set for it. So that one says Performance Planner. The next one is a tool called Market Finder, which is essentially a sync with Google tool. If you search Market Finder into your browser, you should find it very quickly. And essentially this, I think for any Irish business, this is crucial, because the Irish market, in honesty, it's a very small market in comparison to what we have across the EU and in the UK in particular. So Market Finder essentially allows you to put in either your website or a number of terms and show you the demand for that business in other markets, essentially. So it's a really, really useful tool to look at. And like I would say, like export should be what every Irish business is thinking of as their their first step. After setting up and getting things going, you should be looking at new markets, because the demand elsewhere is just so huge. And that will essentially give you a really good breakdown of each market by market in terms of income demographics, population size, and demand for your specific business in those markets. So really, really useful one to get off the ground. Just actually within that point, again, there's two other things here. Initiatives that we run in Google. So there's one which is called a breakfast briefing series, which is on the last Friday of every month. Normally it's an in-person event in the Google office in Dublin. I believe they're moving it to a virtual event. This is an event for essentially anyone to come in and learn about advertising. You have to sign up online. And essentially it's a forum where we've our auditorium with about 250 to 300 people who come in, and we'll give different topics each month around digital advertising. So I've given quite a few of the talks to the audience when they come in on Fridays, and it's a really, really good forum. It's a really good platform. So that's something to look into. And the other one is the Grow with Google events. So we go around Ireland and we actually do kind of a road show. So you kind of mentioned around, not necessarily in universities, but more so for small businesses working with Enterprise Ireland. We do one in Portlaoise, in Galway, Cork, Donegal. And again, essentially a team of Googlers, myself, I've been involved in a few of them, and kind of some of the managers and a few other reps. We go around essentially and give talks on Google advertising. So if you ever see one of those coming up in your local area, or if you're working with the local enterprise office, sign up for them and go on to those talks, because there's some really useful information to be gained. And then the final one, I think this is a really useful one. So a lot of people are trying to understand, how does Google advertising work, how to upskill, whatever. Google have a full free online certificates essentially in all elements of Google advertising. So it's under the Google Skills Shop. And within the Google Skills Shop, again, to search Google Skills Shop into your browser, you essentially have the fundamentals of search advertising, fundamentals of shopping advertising, fundamentals of display, and YouTube. And this gives you essentially, like a lot of media agencies in Ireland, for example, right? People go through digital marketing degrees, they have a degree in digital marketing. They touch the surface of Google advertising, being very honest. Whenever a grad enters into a media agency in Dublin, the first thing that they're going to do is spend the first month doing these Google Skills Shop ads, academy essentially, in order to upskill themselves. And then they're handed over to manage customers' accounts in a lot of cases. So they're really, really comprehensive, really high quality information. And that is where I would really go to kind of upskill and learn the in-depth kind of understandings of how it all works, if you want to. And yes, that's my quick 5. Conversion tracking, understand what you want to track. keyword finder to understand what to target, performance planner to look at how much capacity there is on those campaigns, market finder to find new markets, and finally Google Skills Shop to upskill and learn all about Google Ads.
Fabulous. That
Brilliant.
could be worth $1 million here, Mark. What do you think that type of info? Like, I didn't know that they had the kind of certificates online. This is something I was, again, during lockdown, I was kind of looking around at all kind of what's available out there. So I was upskilling with some competitors' software that they were offering some education on, which has really been helpful to me. But it is so interesting how the education's been democratized like that. Like you said, what they teach in a business course or what they teach from the people who are actually generating these ads, it's going to be completely different. It's real tactical, as in like stuff that you can actually use. Like you can go become an expert in some BI tool like Looker if you have, like I said, a month to dig into it, and whatever, $200, and then, do you mean there's real skills you can just get online now, which I think people aren't really taking advantage of. But Mark, how about those lightning round questions? What's going on?
Okay, one last quick question, Ogie. Sorry, just to get ranked on Google, is there anything? I know it's kind of in contrast to the ads, but is there anything you can do to help that quickly?
It's a funny one. Like, we genuinely actually can't advise any customer on SEO rankings, and everyone, we can help them compete on paid, but we can't advise on organic. And the reason is it will be unfair advantage for any client. Like, it's essentially looking at making your website as relevant as possible and having as much information and content on it. Like, I don't know much about the back end in terms of SEO. It wouldn't be in my skill set. Your best bet is looking into like a web dev or a media agency who works on SEO, because they will know an awful lot more than me. So I'm not even going to try and give you an answer that I don't know about, to be very honest.
No worries. I'm sure ads can only help, though, as in clicks to the website. The more people on your website, the more you're going to go up.
Yeah, to be honest, they're completely separate. So they ad traffic won't impact your SEO results.
Oh, really? Okay.
Nice gem there, because we actually had when I first started in HubSpot, we had a SEO tool that we used to show a lot in demos and stuff, but we actually had to sunset it because it was essentially not really telling you the truth about what to do. Not that it was set up like that, but when it was set up, things were a little bit more simple. So now our SEO tools are just more tracking how you're doing rather than how to do better. Do you know what I mean? So
I'm sure there's some dark arts out there that can help us skip the queue, but that's another podcast maybe.
Yeah, might have somebody on just like in a balaclava, giving us the hot take. Anyway.
Okay. What apps do you use the most?
What apps do I use the most? Recently, MyFitnessPal. I've started with a new PT, and he's helped me tracking meals. I've never done it before in my life, so that's been my daily rigor at the minute. Beyond that, Audible, big one for audiobooks. I'm not a great reader, being semi-dyslexic, so audiobooks are my go-to.
Just throwing that in there.
Sorry?
They're a sponsor of the podcast, SharkPod. Link.
Oh, nice. Very good. Very good.
Right, go on.
Yeah, that'd be my two standout. Yeah.
Okay, very good. What's your favorite social media and why?
Probably a love-hate relationship, but the only one that I really use is Instagram. I don't really use Facebook or Snapchat or any of the other ones. Instagram is my kind of go-to. I'd say mainly because most of where my friends would be and catching up with what they're up to and that kind of thing.
Is there any social media that you've deleted for any reasons?
I haven't deleted Facebook, but sorry, can you still hear me?
We're still here, Luke.
Might be me.
I think you're gone.
I think it's you.
Oh, you're back.
Okay.
Yeah. No, not deleted as such, but I've deleted the app for Facebook. I'm not sure why I don't use it anymore. I just find it's lots of junk news articles that I don't really want to be clickbaited into trying to read about the latest catastrophe in the world. Similar to Luke's point earlier on, I'm not a big news reader for that reason. I kind of looked at my own mindset and what's going on, and prefer not to have too many external forces filling me with junk.
Yeah. Do you ever
panic
about yourself afterwards? That's celebrity when they look what they look like now. Sometimes I'll go in and I have to click through 6 things to get to. I
don't know why I need to know what former Big Brother house contestants look like now, but I had a look yesterday. Surprisingly good. Okay, what's the best business idea you've never acted upon?
interesting one. We had a college project at one stage, which was actually it wasn't my idea. It was one of the guys in the group who came up with essentially a portable My Waddy holder, essentially, which later got introduced. So essentially, like everyone has water. There's water coolers pretty much everywhere in universities and in businesses. You go and fill your bottle of water, but water's a bit plain and basic. A lot of people get bored of drinking water. So his idea was essentially have a little squeeze juice bottle that you could buy and fill your water bottle with. And about a year or two later, My Waddy have obviously came up with it and it's launched the market. So that was an interesting one.
I'm a big fan of those things. I can't. Well, I get bored with water like that. I thought you were going to say attached to a water cooler machine was an option to put in some blackcurrant. You know,
that could be another one. Yeah,
we'll go offline with that one as well. It's a great idea. We'll get some pay-per-click. Mark, what's the next question?
If you could do business anywhere in the world, where would it be?
For me, I'm very keen on moving to Sydney, Australia, because I just think that lifestyle is exactly what I want to be living in my late 20s, and spend time at the beach, being able to exercise outdoors, do a bit of surfing, and have a decent work-life balance.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. How much money is enough money?
Very interesting point. I think definitely came to a realization that, the amount of money you make is not necessarily going to impact your happiness. I think, as you alluded to earlier on, Luke, kind of hitting that six figures sum is a big milestone for a lot of people. And I guess you kind of realize that it doesn't add additional value to your livelihood, doesn't add additional happiness to your life. And I think that's whenever you really need to look inside to look at like what are your passions and interests and what's going to really drive you forward. So yeah, to me, I think I always had my key goal was to be a millionaire at 30. 4 years to go, not quite there yet. Sorry?
Plenty of time. You get there.
Yeah, it's definitely been done in less previously, but I think I've definitely moved away from having such a strong focus on money as a material object and looking at the importance of it, because I think once you have security and you have good relationships, good friendships, and stability in your life, I think they're much more important than any amount of money. And I've seen a lot of people who've made a lot of money and been very unhappy doing so, and kind of realizing that balancing point for me is much more important than any paycheck at the end of the month.
Do you know, Mark, I'd like to jump in there, maybe touch on that one as well, because that's a lot of people on the podcast, they have different answers and stuff like that. But I was thinking about this during the week, and it scared the shit out of myself, because I was thinking, how much money would you actually need if you were to live the way you wanted to live a normal, like not a normal life, but like a nice, comfortable. You'd probably need, let's say that it's 50% higher in tax. You probably need 10 grand a month with 5 grand coming in. That would be that's a nice kind of stipend a month, right? If I live till 90, I would have to, that's 720 months. So that's, it works out at 7.2 million euro that you'd have to make. So we got to get after it. We're only getting started. Anyway, I don't want to put pressure on it, but like, you never know what way Luke is going to go with that. He might just say like, actually, I could survive on $1,000 and I could live in Peru or something. Yeah, anyway. But I'm just keep it in mind.
What do you fear?
What do I fear? I think one of my biggest challenges or biggest fears has been getting over external judgment or pressure. And I think that's something which, looking at intrinsically, when you're entrepreneurial, when you put yourself out there, when there's initiatives you want to do, you really have to build quite a thick skin. And I think it's something that I've always struggled with, is looking at, how people perceive me. Am I upholding my image? Am I acting in the ways that people expect me to act? And that maybe comes from, as I mentioned, kind of my background, maybe feeling that I was seen as lesser growing up when I was very young. I always wanted to kind of establish myself and have a good, repertoire and people to kind of trust me and have that credibility in a workplace. And I think as a result of that, I almost became quite afraid of being more true to myself, or that kind of fear of judgment of having an opinion that was different, or standing out, or pursuing an idea that was maybe a little bit left field.
Fear of judgment, huge. Mark, one more. Let's drive it home. What's a good one there?
Okay, 2 more. If you could advise someone to learn one skill, what would it be?
I think the biggest pivotal skill that I look at is developing a growth mindset, like genuinely being able to understand and overcome challenges and not having the fear of thinking that you're restricted in what you can learn or what you can do. I think mindset is crucial to development and crucial to progress. I think so many people limit themselves and pigeonhole themselves by saying, I could never do that, or, oh, you know, great for them, but you know, I couldn't, or I wouldn't be able to. And I think that is something that it's a real mindset shift of like, no, you can do whatever you want to do if you apply yourself and try and learn whatever skill set it is you're trying to develop. So I think, yeah, developing a growth mindset is crucial to long-term success.
Great advice. Okay, last one. What advice would you give to the 18-year-old you?
18-year-old me, try not to fuck up as much as I did, and learn some of the lessons that I learned earlier in life. No, I think being honest, I think it's I'm really grateful for a lot of the challenges that I went through, because it's actually what's pushed me in a really positive direction. I think don't be afraid to seek out discomfort in a sense, and don't be afraid to try things that might challenge your perceptions, but ultimately have the courage to make the right decisions for yourself. Have the courage to you know, be around the people that you should be around, and don't allow yourself to be in negative circles that are pulling you back. Don't allow yourself to be your own worst critic and pull yourself back. And yeah, just allow yourself to kind of to have the courage to do what you actually want to do.
Love it. That's some great stuff there as well. So what we're going to do is we're probably going to be Wednesday week this comes out, but I'd like to thank Ogie Hollywood, still a great name, for coming along today for the SharkPod. There is there may or may not be a shark t-shirt that looks something like this on the way to you at some stage. So anyway, give our best to our friend Barry Hickey as well when you see him. I suppose you won't even see him in person for a few months, I wouldn't say.
I'll have a video call next week, so I'll make sure to let him know you guys are saying hello.
Yeah, give him a shout out. But thanks very much, and let's keep in touch.
Thanks very much. Look, guys, cheers for having me on. Thanks very much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Cheers.